Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, this is another design inspired by the TV show on Netflix, Bridgerton. I was very highly inspired with the architecture in all these homes. And while I'm at it, I am using this handy dandy little tool created by Rosie from Rosie's Dessert Spots that helps you mark where your scallops go. I will show you how I use it in the video, but basically you can see that there are marks where the swags, the arches are that show you the size of your cake. So you go by the size of your cake, and then the lines, the marks on the top are how far from the top you want your swags to go so that you can get even spacing and flawless results in your swags, whether you're using buttercream or in this case, I am actually using it to mark on fondant where my fondant swags are going to go. So let's get going with this design. First thing we're going to do is put our fondant onto our cake. Now, I normally do the panel method. This time I decided to go with the draping method. And I don't know if you'll notice on here, but there's a reason why I do the paneling method. And I will explain where the different techniques, where the paneling method for me is more beneficial and easier to do than the draping, especially now that the tall tiered cakes are quite the trend. It's sticking around still, which I am happy about. They make a very big impression. But the problem comes in when you are draping your fondant on top. Now you can see I'm just trying to get my hands underneath that fondant. I rolled it out to about a quarter of an inch thickness. Now, where you run into problems with these tall cakes, you want to make sure that you get that top edge attached right away because the height makes the weight of the fondant pull on your fondant more than on a regular just 2-layered cake. Now that we're doing 3 to 4 layers of cake in each tier, it makes a big difference. But the technique in general is that you pull out your pleats and you apply it to your cake. I had added some shortening onto the buttercream to get the fondant to stick. Now you just kind of turn the turntable as you go and work your way down, but you can kind of see where it's starting to pull on that top edge a little bit. So basically your fondant gets thinner as it gets towards the bottom, and it can also cause more pleating. Or maybe not more pleating, but more wrestling with the fondant since you have a bigger distance to go down. So I just did it the best way I could. I'm just trying to take it section by section. And I did end up having some creases, which I don't like. And that is why I like to use the panel method, because you don't run into this. You get a nice, smooth, evenly thick piece of fondant all the way around. But we're going to work with it. We're going to make it work. And I used Cornflower by Wilton is the color that I used to dye this fondant this color. Now, the way I like to get a crisp edge is to turn it upside down and use my smoother to kind of coax that fondant down towards the board on the bottom. And I'm just using my tool to kind of push that edge in there. Then I use a wadded up piece of fondant to smooth it out. And I'm poking holes. That's another thing that I like better about the paneling is that you don't get as many air bubbles as you do when you are doing the draping method. But using a extra piece of fondant to smooth out your fondant works better in my opinion because it forms to the shape of your cakes versus a flat smoother like these. But I am again trying to just reinforce that top edge again and again. When you're doing the paneling, you don't have to worry about those crisp corners because just with the mere technique of applying it in the way that you do, there is already that crisp edge. So anyway, we're going to work with it. Most of that's going to be covered up. So now that it's in the fridge firming up, I'm just using some various Baroque style molds that I have. You can use whatever you want. I will try to find the links for all these, but some of them we've had for a little while, so I'm not sure if I can find all of them. I know I can find this one. I have tagged it before in the video description. If I can't find the exact molds, in this one I think I can find most of them. But this time and in the future, if I can't find the exact mold that I used, I will try to attach a link to something similar so that you can still get the same idea, even though I couldn't find the exact same thing. I've been doing cakes for a long time, guys, so this is, 16 years now? So a lot of my tools are no longer in existence. Luckily, things have gotten better and improved. So any tools that I do have that are newer are much better than what I previously had. So those are all of my shapes that I'm going to use, minus those extra pieces for the pillars. I didn't end up using them, but I wanted to have them just in case. It depended on the height of the tier. So now I am making, I don't know if you ever look close at the background in Bridgerton or any Regency era kind of architecture. There's a lot of different textures. There's a lot of different patterns going on. So for the background of these framed pieces that I did, I wanted it to have kind of like a wallpaper look. So I used this stencil, plastic stencil, and I just pushed it onto the fondant. I put some shortening on the back of it first, put it onto the piece of fondant, rolled out fondant, and then just rolled over and pushed it into the fondant just a little bit so that when you airbrush over the top, you don't have any overspray happening. It's just getting on the pieces of the fondant that are sticking out from the stencil. And that's just white airbrush coloring that I used. And I attached the other pieces while it was still kind of wet. That way I didn't have to add anything behind the pieces necessarily to get them to stick. It would all dry together. And here's a little tool again. I added that picture at the beginning because you can't really see it very good there. What you do, this was a 7-inch tier, I believe. So I just found the 7-inch. If I'm saying it wrong, just go by whatever's on there. Hold it up to the top of the tier. You gauge how far down that swag's gonna go, and use your inch marking of your cake. And you can use a toothpick, you can use a needle, you can use a Dresden tool, something with a sharper point or edge to it, and you're just scoring in where your swags are going to go. And leave about 1/4 of an inch to almost, I'd say about 1/4 of an inch in between each one. That's kind of built into this also, I believe. But if it's not, that's how it worked out for me. Because your pieces are not going to lay right on top of each other. You want them to meet. So there's going to be a little bit of a space in between each one of those swags. And this is how I made the swags. I just used regular fondant. I didn't add any tylose or anything. Used my skewers to form the shape of the swags. I just used 3. And just cut off the excess. And I used my fondant smoother, the curved edge, to just form them in that shape. And I just let them sit for about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes to firm up a little bit so that you can transfer them onto the cake without them losing their shape. But also, you don't want to leave them sitting for too long or they could crack when you apply them to the cake, when you try to form them to the contour of the outside of the cake. And right there is where I'm removing the excess. I cut a line in between. I cut the excess off vertically. It was kind of at a 45-degree angle to the swag, but it's basically vertically, and then butted the 2 ends together. And then I made sure, too, that all of our swags are as close to even as possible on how far down they hang. I used the marking as the top edge that I scored in there as the top edge of my swags. Then I'm just attaching all the details with just some water because fondant sticks to fondant with water. Now these pillars, hindsight, I wish I would have cut that middle section off of both pieces so they didn't kind of taper in at the middle and so that it would bring that top edge down because I really wanted the top of them to be level with the top of the cake, but if you didn't know that, it probably wouldn't stick out to you too much. So yeah, just FYI on that. And then these I attached with a little bit of water also. I'm being very careful on how I'm lifting them. I don't want to touch that background airbrush if I can help it, because it's not 100% dry. I mean, you could wait till it was more dry, but I was kind of running out of time. And again, you don't want those to dry too much because those framed out pieces, which I didn't show you, I just cut those pieces at a 45-degree angle so you get your corners to match up. And I'm cutting the excess off of the, should we call it the crown molding around the top, so that my pillars set flush with the cake. But when it comes to putting those paneled pieces on there, again, you don't want them to dry so much that you can't shape it to the shape of the cake, the contour. Now I'm just using some boba tea straws to support the top tier. and just pushing them in with my small rolling pin, adding a little bit of buttercream. They are all the same height. And then just placing the top tier on and making sure all my pieces are as clean and neat as possible. And then I couldn't figure out how I was going to decorate this because there's a lot of going on in a more duo-toned technique already, just a lot of different textures and shapes. So I went with just some fake hydrangeas and some fake baby's breath type flowers because these are some of the ones that would have been used a lot at the time. And the cornflower is obviously the choice of color if I want to stick with the white and the blue. And there it is all together. I think it turned out really nice. And I'm going to link in the video description a link directly to where you can get one of those swag markers yourself. This is not necessarily a sponsored video, but I'm trying to help out a friend. So check it out and we'll catch you on the next one.